Despite a stressful transfer deadline day, Arsenal got the man they wanted in the end, with Raheem Sterling joining the club on a season-long loan. Now, while he is a player I've spoken about before, in this video we're going to go through everything about the transfer and exactly why Arsenal decided to sign him. So let's get into it. Considering the last few transfer windows have been relatively quite quiet for Arsenal, this one was definitely a stressful one. Not only did it look like throughout the whole day Arsenal were not going to get any sort of attacker come in, we were also still waiting on deals such as Nketiah and, if not, Nelson to actually leave the club. Now eventually it looks like all of that has happened, and in the end Arsenal have got a brilliant deal, being able to get Raheem Sterling on a loan deal with no obligation to buy or option to buy, with a reduced wage, apparently around about half his wages or even below that. Now before we get into the tactics and what he is going to be like as a player within the team, I want to quickly go over the deal in general, because I think Arsenal have got a fantastic deal here in the end. Now while there's definitely people who will discredit it like they always will, it's definitely a good point to say that Sterling wasn't the best at Chelsea over the last 2 years. Now I think overall that is a very unfair statement, because the first year where he joined 2 years ago, he was actually excellent, I felt, and one of the only Chelsea players that was actually fighting back against their poor mid-table form. And last season, despite him getting thrown out of the team near to the end of it, he still put up 10 goals and 8 assists in all competitions, and more importantly was still quite effective in the big games for them. He still had the same traits that he had at Man City, and maybe he's lost a little bit of pace, but it's not nothing too concerning. And I think Sterling is someone that really benefits from having an atmosphere he can thrive in, with people trusting him. He puts a lot of pressure on himself as a person, as we've seen from clips from him from that All or Nothing series on Amazon, and I think it's very clear that he's a player that needs a great atmosphere and players to work off him necessarily to achieve. Now not always, because I still think at Chelsea he did brilliant things, but that's why I think he would do a lot better at Arsenal than he did at Chelsea last season. This deal is also fantastic in the idea that Arsenal really need to make an attacking signing as well. Going later and later in the window, it's going to be hard to negotiate a deal that actually works for Arsenal more than anything, and they were able to find a market opportunity, which they go on about all the time, and a situation where Chelsea didn't want to play Sterling anymore and he was thrown out, and that they could get him for a really cheap deal. Now I did a video a few weeks ago analysing every target, and I did speak about Sterling. Now while I said I liked how he played and it's definitely certainly different to what we had, I didn't necessarily recommend the signing, because I thought personally he was going to be too expensive wage wise, and Chelsea wouldn't let us have him that easily. Now in the end obviously they did, so I was wrong, and I do think when it got down to the last few hours of transfer deadline day, getting in anyone is more important than that necessarily being the world's best player. And I've been for a while saying that I don't really care who Arsenal get in the forward area, just someone that can definitely contribute on both wings. And this is the thing, even though he was heavily criticised last season at big parts for not being very good, he still contributed a lot to Chelsea and still played a lot of minutes. 2,700 minutes he played overall in 43 games in all competitions, playing 22 times on the left wing and 11 times on the right wing, and the other positions were made up a few times. This is one of the main reasons I think he's a great signing for Arsenal. He finally gives that backup support for Saka, with being an experienced player and good enough to play for us, but he can also play on the left if someone like Martinelli or Trossard isn't on form either. We can play in the centre, I wouldn't necessarily play him there, and I don't think he'll get into there for Arsenal, but the wings are the main position I think we needed to cover. Now sometimes Arsenal, you could say, lack an attacking edge, maybe an X factor, which okay, yeah, this maybe not be that X factor player, but Sterling is definitely someone that is more of an output player than is someone that's going to build up all the time. Despite last season Arsenal being very free scoring and scored a lot of goals, they were still heavily relying on things such as corners, and you obviously want them doing a little bit more in actual play. Sterling is someone that gets himself in the right spaces at all times. He is very good inside the box at picking up positions and moving off defenders to find that space. Now he's not the biggest person in the world, he's not got the biggest stature, so he has to use this good agile movement to actually get into these positions in order to score, which is something like Trossard does in many ways, but it's nice to have another player that can do that as well. One of the main reasons I also like Sterling is that he is a brilliant one-on-one carrier. He can pick the ball up from pretty much anywhere on the pitch and dribble with it really well, and there's obviously been problems with him maybe over dribbling it sometimes and not looking out for players. I'm sure with a team like Arsenal, where he'll have that atmosphere around him and be almost trusted to pass it to his teammates, I'm sure that he will. Sterling is not really a pass guy. If you put him on the left for deeper, I think he does do a better performance than Martinelli, because he is used to these deeper positions. He has around 5.5 progressive carries per game, and if you look at his carries, although he is doing a lot into the penalty box, he's also doing a lot outside the penalty box, where he's coming in from deep and getting the ball just up there in the transition, which I think could be very important. I also like with Sterling that I don't think his performances really get worse on either wing. I think he's very accustomed to both wings and kind of adapts to how he plays. He's so good at carrying the ball from either side, so I do think he's a suitable backup for Saka or Martinelli and even could start some games. But more importantly than the carries to me is how he does end product after it. He is someone that likes taking on people, like we've said, with around 2 take-ons per game being successful, which is a pretty decent level, not the best that he's had in his career, but he often is really good at picking out teammates because he has a better dribbling stance than someone like Martinelli. Now, we've gone on about Martinelli not wanting the ball deeper. He's more of an inside forward, likes it closer to the goal. But Sterling doesn't necessarily have to be like that. He can pick it up deeper, but his dribbling is so good, and when he often gets to the byline, he usually pulls the ball back, which is something that Arsenal actually have been doing more and more this season, with the fact we've been trying to open that space just outside the box for our midfielders. So he definitely could be viable in that option. But however, more importantly than all of that could be his progressive passes received being so high. This means that he's actually getting to positions behind the back line where people are being able to make progressive passes for his runs. Now, throughout his whole career, this has been a very high level. When he first joined Chelsea, they dipped below 9, but other than that, last season they went back up to 11, and every season at Man City they're around 13 and 14. He is so good at running off the back of people and running in behind. This is something that Arsenal don't really have, that transitional threat, which he can definitely bring, because he is still quite a quick player, even though a lot of people want to dismiss that. I think when Arsenal try and get him into much more space, he's going to be so important against them low blocks, because as soon as Arsenal win the ball quickly, they can get Sterling going and run him through. Also, another great thing about him on the counter-attack is that he gets in the right positions. Now, I'm not going to act like he's the most clinical player in the world, because he isn't, and he does miss some big chances, but he does get in the right areas at all times. There's so many times where he's been back post waiting for a cross or a pass, and he'll peel off and get into the good areas within the 6-yard box when his other winger is doing well on the other side. This is something that we need, that better positioning from Martinelli, who has bad box presence usually. And although he does miss big chances, he's actually scored about around his XG in his career, or it's about evened out overall. The first 3 seasons at Man City, he outperformed his expected goals by around 2 to 4 goals. But in his last season at Man City, he actually went below it by 1, and at Chelsea, he also got around his XG, actually outperformed it last year as well. So you've got a player that not only is going to offer something different for Arsenal in wing positions, he's experienced, he's won the Premier League multiple times, he's worked under Mikel Arteta, so it won't take that long to get familiar with the manager, and he is hungry to prove himself because he's been thrown out by another team. This isn't just a very good opportunity for Arsenal, this is also a lifeline for Sterling. He really needed this move in many ways, and I think he'll really prove to people that he can be a good player. I also believe because there's no option to buy or obligation, this does not stop Arsenal from making a bigger winger purchase next year, which I think is probably the plan. Although Arsenal's transfer window is probably quite disappointing overall, the fact that they've made a net profit means that they're surely going big next summer when maybe some better targets are available. But I really don't mind this as a stopgap option, and considering he will basically be replacing people like Nelson's minutes. Nelson played 268 minutes last season, and Nketiah played 1082. He can definitely get 1200 minutes to catch up with that and be more important than them two within the team. But let me know what you guys think about this signing. I get it's definitely a panic buy in many senses, but I still think it's a really good cheap deal for Arsenal. What do you guys think? Let me know. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.